Hello, friends, welcome. Friends, I just saw an article in the newspapers that the telecom department will not offer 600 megahertz of spectrum to telcos again. So there were two articles. One was done in Economic Times, and I saw this article in the morning. And the reason that they are quoting is mentioned in this article. It says that the government wants to take its time and understand the best use of 600 megahertz spectrum to ensure that it does not interfere with satellite services. In the next auction, the telcos may get all the unsold spectrum from the previous auction, leaving the 600 megahertz band. The 700 megahertz will likely not see any suitors again this time. So the way where I'm getting confused is this the mention of interference with satellite services. Now, friends, what I am planning to do in this video, as you already know, those who are following me, that I am doing a auction series. I done an article, done a video yesterday on Bharati's bidding strategy. So before I go on, on in that trajectory of doing other operators' bidding strategy, I thought of taking this important issue into consideration today and discuss with you what I feel is the situation and why I believe that this may not be the right reason to quote, which is interference with satellite services. And I'll give you the facts. So the way I'm going to structure this presentation is the following. I will dissect this particular article on a factual basis and present before you all the facts so that you are aware, what the situation as far as 600 megahertz spectrum is concerned from an ITU regulation point of view, as well as National Frequency Allocation Plan, and also throw the reasons why 600 megahertz spectrum is extremely crucial and map it to the operator's current situation on ground from the point of view of making 5G services viable. I have already done a lot of videos earlier on the importance of sub-gigahertz spectrum from the point of view of not only monetizing 5G services, but also in the interest of the consumers. Because for consumers, 5G services today does not make any sense because they are all focused on high frequency bands. And high frequency band is not useful for mobiles. Why? Because most of the time you are sitting at your own house or in your office, indoors, and these mobiles high frequency spectrum does not penetrate indoors. So in indoors, you have got two options. Either you basically use the services using a low frequency spectrum which penetrate indoors, or connect to Wi-Fi. Now connecting to Wi-Fi does not make any sense because Wi-Fi will not be able to give you any benefit of 5G services. It will only give you speed, but all the other benefits like latency and various kinds of SLAs, etc., that you will be able to do in 5G, you will not be able to do Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is meaningless from the point of view of 5G. It is as good as connecting to 4G. So therefore you need the low frequency band. Unless you get the low frequency band, the consumers are not going to get benefited on 5G services on mobile. High frequencies are only for FWA. It may be useful for mobile in some situation, but 70 to 80% situation, the mobiles are going to be always dependent on low frequency band. And from a low frequency point of view, India is very weak. Indian operators are very weak, and that's why low frequency band spectrum is extremely important to allocate to Indian operators by the government at an affordable rate. Right? So let's go step by step. Let's look at the regulation part, where we stand as far as regulation is concerned, as far as 600 megahertz spectrum is concerned. Now friends, for that I have created these few slides. So I'm going to take you through these slides. The first thing which I am going to point out is that TRAI on 11th April 2022 recommended that the 600 megahertz spectrum should be auctioned and should be having a band plan of 612 to 652, paired with 663 to 703 megahertz, and this is the APT harmonized band plan. We call it APT 600 megahertz band. This is quite different from the US band plan because US has got some constraint which they actually had to take into consideration, and therefore their band plan is different. But 600 megahertz band plan, the APT band plan, is well established, and many countries are using this for deploying 5G services. Now friends, let's look at the National Frequency Allocation Plan. and see what the National Frequency Allocation Plan for 600 megahertz is talking about. Now, this is the extract of the latest National Frequency Allocation Plan of year 2022 as far as India is concerned. Now, if you look at this talks about 614 to 942 megahertz allocation of radio communication services, and India part has been laid out here in the left part of this table. Here it says 614 to 890. Now, why 614 to 890 is important? As I told you, the band basically start from 612 and ends at 703. That is why this is important, 614 to 890. So what it says fixed, mobile, and then it gives you certain footnotes which I am going to discuss. What these footnotes talks about in the later part of this discussion in the presentation. Now, there is also a reference of broadcasting. You can see that there is no reference of satellite here. Do you see any satellite here? There is no reference of satellite at all. There is one reference of satellite which I am going to talk about, but this is nothing to do with this particular portion of the band. This is way below, and therefore I was quite surprised when I saw this article in the newspaper about talking about satellite services. It has got nothing to do with satellite, right? And it has got nothing to do with any other services. Band is completely clean and fully flexible for allocation if there is a need to. And if there is any dependency, we will talk about those dependency in the future course of this presentation. So let's go on the footnotes. Let's discuss the footnote, because the footnotes are certain constraints which are laid out for the allocation of services in this particular portion of the band, which is 614 to 890. So here are the footnotes. The first footnotes, this is also an extract from the NFAP 2020-22, which basically says that the part of the frequency, this is 5317A. This is 5317A. Let me just tell you where it is. 5317A. So look at this. The part of the frequency of 698 to 960, which is again on the higher part in region 2. Region 2 is not India. India is actually region 3. The frequency band of 694 to 790 megahertz in region 1, 790 to 960 in region 1 and 3, region 1 and 3, region 3 is India, are allocated to mobile services on a primary basis identified for use of administration wishing to implement international mobile telecommunication services, has to see resolution 224, 760 and 749. I am going to talk about what this resolution talks about and what kind of constraint it imposes for deployment of IMT services. The identification does not prelude the use of this frequency band for any other application services which are allocated, and does not establish priority in the radio regulation, which I told you. This is basically an extract of the radio regulation. So every allocation is guided by these things. Wherever, what kind of services which you can deploy are all mentioned here, right? You can't deploy anything else other than the services which are mentioned here. And then there are certain footnote, which is India specific footnote, which is IND 16 and IND 18, which are mentioned here. Where you also see that there are basically what it says: radio astronomy services Pune need to be protected from the emission falling within the frequency band for astronomical services. Again, this is not satellite; it is radio astronomy. And then region 3, the frequency band range this much. This is not falling into the 600 megahertz spectrum for PPDR, right? And additional part of the resolution, again, this is not falling within the 600 megahertz band. They see resolution 646 for revision WRC 19. Now, recently WRC 23 was concluded. So what I thought is, I'll just take you through these footnote, the revised footnote of WRC 2023, so that you can look into the footnote and see what the constraints that they have imposed. So this is the footnote, right? So the most important part of the footnote is where the reference of WRC resolution is mentioned is 224. Rest of them, 760 and 749 is not applicable. So I am not going to go into that because it has got nothing to do with anything that we are talking about here. Most important part is resolution 224. What it says: frequency band for terrestrial component of international mobile services below 1 gigahertz. Now you see that what I have highlighted the relevant portion of the resolution. So the first highlighted portion says that some administration of region 2 and 3 are planning to use this frequency band and the parts of the frequency band for IMT. Because if you look at the WRC, our NFAP document 22, it clearly mentions here the IND 16, right? IND 16 here you see. So I have extracted IND 16 here, which says the following frequency band or part there have been implemented for IMT, and this particular reference band of 600 MHz is mentioned here, subject to the following footnotes, which I am discussing. And the references of these footnotes have been already extracted out here, which I have already showed you. And from those footnotes, there are certain linkages which are there on resolution, which we are discussing right now. So let's go there. So where we are, so we already said that region 3 they can planning to use. So they are saying already they are planning to use it for IMT services. Then I am highlighted some portions which says that some frequency band or part of the frequency band identified for IMT below 1 GHz are used extensively by many countries and various other terrestrial mobile system application, including public protection, disaster relief, and sea resolution 646. So this is nothing to do with satellite, by the way, and India doesn't have any implications on this particular aspect. Then it says the frequency band 460 to 470 is also allocated by metro. Look, this is the only part which is 460 to 470 for satellite, and this does not fall anywhere close, because our band, again let's go to the band, our band is where 612 to 652, 663 to 703. So where is satellite coming here, right? There is no question of any satellite here. Now let's go further. Then it says, again we are in the WRC's WRC 23's document, which says that the frequency band 470 to 862 is governed by this particular agreement in all region 1 countries except Mongolia. All region 1 countries, see, except Mongolia, Iran. And this agreement contains a provision of terrestrial broadcasting services and other primary terrestrial services, a plan of digital television, and list of stations and other primary terrestrial services. See, there is an agreement which basically says that when there is a neighboring country, and if the neighboring country objects to deployment of a certain class of services in the particular country, then that neighboring country has to be prevented from any interference. That's all. So if you are deploying within the geography of your country, you can deploy whatever you want. Nobody will have any problems with you. But if you are causing any interference to a neighboring country in that particular frequency band, you should be taking precautions and you should not do that. That is what the agreement is in simple layman terms, right? So other than that, there are no constraints at all, because all the countries have been deploying and identifying this particular spectrum band for IMT. And look at this particular portion which I have highlighted, which says that all administration terrestrial broadcasting is a vital part of communication and information infrastructure. The flexibility must be afforded to the administration. The administration is willing to is fully flexible to whatever it wants to determine at the national level how much spectrum to be made available for IMT from within the identified frequency band, taking into account the current use of spectrum and the need for other application, to develop its own transition plan if necessary, tailored to meet the specific requirement of the existing system, to have the ability for the identified frequency band to be used for all services having allocation in those frequency band, not satellite. There is no satellite here, right? To determine the timing and availability of the frequency band identified for IMT in order to meet a particular market demand and national consideration, right? So this is in short this particular resolution, the most important resolution, 224, and rest of the resolutions which are mentioned, you can just peek into it, and if you want I can just show it to you what the resolutions are. 760, let's go to 760. I'll do a search here on 760. So let's do 760. So if I go to 760, what it says, this basically says provision related to frequency band 694 to 790 in region 1 by mobile except aeronautical mobile services and by other services. India does not fall into region 1, so it's not applicable to us. Okay. Now let's look at what are the other resolution here, which is 749. Let's look at 749. I'll do a search here on 749. So let's do 749 here. 749. Now 749, if I go into this document, what this resolution says, it says that the use of frequency band 790 is, again it is not falling within the 600 megahertz band, which I told you, right? It is way above 600, 790 to 862 in countries in region 1. So again it does not fall within our of interest. So it does not have any impact. So therefore this article is totally misleading. It doesn't have any meaning, any legs, it's completely unnecessary, and I don't know what is going on here, right? But let me explain why this particular band is extremely important for our interest, our national interest, for the interest of the consumer. And let me explain by using this particular chart or an application which I used yesterday to describe Bharti's strategy. Now let's look at what happened in the past auction, in auction 2023. So what happened was, we had played 600 megahertz band and the price was, it is US dollar, so I'll make it rupees. It was 3,927 crores per megahertz. So these are the AP, Assam, all the prices mentioned here, and all other, these are the reserve prices for all other bands, right? So this is an application which I already shared link. If you are interested, it gives you very interesting data, and with full flexibility, you can actually get data right at your fingerprints. It's very difficult to otherwise have this kind of information. So I've given it free for everybody to use. Okay, so you can use it. So you can have it with US dollar as well as in rupees. So if you convert it into US dollar, it comes out to be 492.6 million US dollar per megahertz. Okay. Now what happened in the last auction? In the last auction, what happened was that if you see the auction price, there were no takers, 0, 600 megahertz, no takers, right? But if you look at the existing spectrum band, let's understand why 600 megahertz is very important for 5G. So let's look at for 700 megahertz. One of the most important band for 5G is 700. Now if you look at 700 megahertz, this particular portion is used by defense. This is used by railways. So this is 10 megahertz used by defense. This is 10 megahertz used by railways. This is RGO 10 megahertz, which they acquired in the last auction. This is free 5 megahertz, and this is given to BSNL. So if you see the full 700 megahertz band, only 5 megahertz is available to take, which most probably RG will take, because 10 megahertz is not sufficient for 5G services, because there are a lot of slicing applications which they have to use. They can't use it within 10 megahertz, so this is good enough. Now the problem is that the 700 megahertz band, if you are going to pair with 600 or 800 megahertz to enhance the quantum of spectrum in the low frequency band for 5G, you will face a lot of problems. The problem is that when you have low frequency band which are near to each other, or any frequency band which are near to each other, it has to pass through the diplexer, right? There is a device which actually separates out the frequency band when it emanates out of the antenna and goes to the electronics for processing. So as soon as you have frequency band which are close to each other passing to the diplexer, it crosses a loss, and that loss can be as high as 1 to 2 dB, right? So what will happen is that, because let's say if you want to pair 800 megahertz with 700 or 600 megahertz with 700, in order to enhance, let's say if RG wants to enhance the capacity beyond 15 megahertz by adding 5 megahertz for 800, then what will happen? The combined spectrum band of 800 as well as 700 megahertz coverage is going to shrink by 40% or 50%. So if your coverage is going to get shrinked, right, then your whole advantage of using a low frequency band is going to become completely useless, right? So therefore, for 5G, it is always important to have one frequency band. You have to identify one frequency band which can be 600, 700, 800, whatever, with sufficient quantum, rather than mixing and matching between low frequency band of different types. You cannot do that, because if you do that, then you are not going to get the advantage of coverage because of diplexer loss. That's why if you look at the 800 megahertz band, now let me just give you the 800 megahertz picture. You will see that in 800 megahertz band, though RGO has got a lot of spectrum in 800 megahertz band, and a lot of spectrum is lying vacant. All these pink that you see, these are all a vacant spectrum. It will be offered through option. So acquiring additional spectrum band in 800 megahertz and pairing with 700 megahertz does not make any sense because of coverage loss, which I already mentioned. So therefore, only thing that RGO can do is to acquire additional 5 megahertz and 700, which is the right thing to do. So they have 15 megahertz, they have got sufficient spectrum, and they can very easily deploy 5G services. But for Bharti, the problem is different. And let me explain to you what the problem with Bharti is. Let's look at the 900 megahertz, and I'll basically lay out the Bharti's spectrum separately for you in 900, and you can see where the problem is. Now, Bharti has, let's say, 9 megahertz spectrum in AP. It has got 10 megahertz spectrum in Assam. But in all other spectrum band, let's say Haryana, they have 10 megahertz. They have spectrum, but their spectrum is lying between 5 to 10 megahertz. Now, this particular spectrum band is already used for 4G. Now, if you want to use this spectrum band for 5G, you will not have sufficient spectrum to park your 4G services. Then what will happen that, let's say RGO gets additional, Bharti gets additional, let me just plot vacant spectrum also on top of it, so that you understand what opportunity Bharti has to expand their 900 megahertz footprint. So let's say they acquire these spectrum band and expand it. But still, what will happen is they need 5 megahertz spectrum in 900 megahertz to park their 4G services. Because they can't uproot the 4G services, right? And then deploy 5G services. They need a parking spot. So you will find that in most of the places, they will not have enough spectrum to deploy 5G services in 900 megahertz spectrum. It is not sufficient for them. So there is no other way for them to deploy 5G services than to acquire 600 megahertz spectrum. There is no other way, Bharti, to give a reliable, high quality 5G services. So you can imagine how important 600 megahertz spectrum is for Bharti. Because 600 megahertz spectrum, there is 40 megahertz spectrum available. Bharti can easily acquire 10 to 20 megahertz spectrum, and it will be in the interest of our country and the consumers. Let's forget about the competitiveness between the operators, because that is none of our concern. We are concerned with ourselves, our interests, right? The 600 megahertz is our spectrum. It is our country's spectrum, right? It should not be lying vacant, right? For not use, because what is going to be the advantage of a spectrum, a vital spectrum and lying vacant, which can't be used for providing services, right? Consumers are not going to get benefited. Our country is not going to get benefited. We are interested in that, right? So therefore, it is important to understand this, that how it is, it is essential that, operators like Bharti, both Bharti and RGO, and even Vodafone Idea deploys low frequency 5G spectrum, because only then 5G will become useful for the mobile users. Otherwise, high frequency spectrum using 5G in high frequency band is of no use, because even if you get 500 Mbps, 600 Mbps connection in mobile, what you're going to do with that? It is completely useless, because there is no application which is suitable. If you are going to use AR, VR or any other, you will be using inside your house. So therefore, inside your house, you should have a better Wi-Fi connectivity, Wi-Fi 6, with more unlicensed spectrum, so that your FWA connections will be much more empowered. And when the high frequency spectrum comes and hits your house, you can just get those signal. You can enhance your broadband connectivity. But as regards mobile phones are concerned, only way to leverage 5G is low frequency band, not high frequency band. So there is a misnomer. You cannot do anything good enough, because you're not going to sitting under the tree and use your mobile phone. You're going to use your mobile phone inside your house, inside your office, where high frequency spectrum does not penetrate. I have been going and shouting at the top of the voice. I do not understand why the simple logic people are not able to understand, right? So that is why I am getting frustrated with all this narrative which is going on in the public domain, and that's why I came out with this video, so as to make it very clear before everybody that we need 600 megahertz spectrum. So let's not spread this, this confusion that 600 megahertz spectrum is satellite spectrum and there will be interference in satellite. No, it may be some other reasons, which I don't know. Maybe I don't know some other, which has got nothing to do with satellite. That's very, very clear, right? So therefore, let's just, I want to stop this now, because we can further discuss another aspect of auction. So I hope that I made myself clear. And if you have any concern and question, let me know in the comment section, and I'll come back next time with a new video or the next part of the video where we talk about Reliance's auction strategy. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient listening.